The galaxy was quiet near Cryo 7, a shattered moon in the outer rim. Dust and debris floated endlessly in space. Only mining drones moved in the silence, their blinking lights like distant stars. But on this day something changed. A dark shape appeared beyond the edge of the moon's ruins, massive, slow, and silent. It was not on any known chart. Imperial Outpost Station 94 picked up the first signal. The crew thought it was a glitch, static and strange pulses, but the readings grew stronger. Commander Thiel, an officer at the station, stared at his console. "This isn't a ship," he said. "It's a fortress." The object was larger than any known cruiser. Smooth black metal reflected no light. It moved without sound, without any visible engine burn. The signal it gave off was not human. It wasn't even recent. The frequency hadn't been used for over 1,000 years. Alarms echoed through the station. Messages were sent to High Command. Within minutes, the news reached Admiral Krell Varn, aboard the dreadnought Obedience, stationed in the core sector. He watched the footage calmly. "Where is it now?" he asked. "Still holding position," an officer replied. "No broadcasts, no response." It disabled a scout drone with an energy pulse. No damage, just shut down. Varn's eyes narrowed. "Send in Fleet Group Vex. I want it surrounded. If it resists, eliminate it." The order went out. Hundreds of ships began moving from nearby sectors. Fighters, destroyers, and carriers joined the operation. The people of nearby colonies were told to stay indoors. No details were shared. No one questioned the order. That was the Empire's way. But across the galaxy, in a small hangar inside an asteroid field, Commander Alan Rowe saw the same signal. He wasn't part of the Empire anymore. He had walked away years ago, tired of orders that cost too many lives. Now he worked as a scout and technician for remote outposts. But when his ship's old systems lit up with the ancient signal, his hands froze on the controls. "I've seen this before," he whispered. He pulled up archived memory from his time in the Navy. Deep in the classified records, a mention of observer-class vessels appeared. No photos, just one warning. "Do not engage. Unknown origin, purpose, observation, and judgment." Alan leaned back in his seat. They found one. He turned his ship toward Cryo 7. The Empire wouldn't wait. They would strike first, ask questions later. He had seen it happen too many times. If this was what he feared, an observer, then firing on it might wake something old and powerful, something the galaxy had forgotten. Back near Cryo 7, Fleet Group Vex arrived. 10 destroyers formed a ring around the silent warship. A transmission was sent in all languages. There was no reply. The fleet approached. Then, without sound, the unknown ship released a pulse of white-blue light. Not a weapon, but a wave. Instantly, every ship in the fleet powered down. Lights blinked out, engines stalled, shields dropped. Not one shot had been fired. The massive ship drifted forward, unharmed. The Empire called it an act of war. Admiral Varn issued a full mobilization order. More ships were coming. The galaxy would soon learn what it meant to defy the Empire. But in a quiet corner of space, Alan Rowe was already flying straight toward the danger, hoping to reach it before the next wave did. Commander Alan Rowe sat in the cockpit of his aging scout ship, Swift, watching the stars stretch as he jumped to hyperspace. His mind wasn't on the flight. It was on the signal. It pulsed faintly through his systems, echoing in a strange rhythmic pattern. It wasn't a human code. It wasn't even aggressive. It felt more like a beacon. He remembered hearing it once before, years ago, back when he was still with the Empire. It had been during a deep space recon mission along the outer edge of the unmapped zone. A scout ship had vanished. When Alan's unit found it, the ship was intact, but the crew was gone. No signs of violence, no damage, just silence, and a strange symbol etched into the control panel. The signal had appeared briefly then, the same one now echoing through his sensors. Back then, the Empire classified it immediately. Unknown interference, they called it. No threat detected. Alan hadn't believed them. That moment had stayed with him ever since. And now the same signal had returned. Only this time, it wasn't just background noise. It was coming from something real, something massive, and something ancient. As Swift dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of Cryo 7's system, Alan gasped. He saw it. The warship floated silently near the remains of the shattered moon, like a shadow frozen in space. It dwarfed even the largest Imperial dreadnoughts. Its surface was smooth and dark, with no visible windows or lights. Its design was alien. No sharp angles, no visible weapons, just flowing curves and faint glowing lines that pulsed slowly. No one built ships like this anymore. Alan scanned for signals. Nothing directed at him. But the same pulse repeated, low, steady, and unreadable. He'd been noticed. A soft light blinked on his console. No warning sirens. No weapon locks. Just a small message. Presence acknowledged. Alan blinked. Presence acknowledged. He repeated aloud. That's it. He hesitated, then turned his ship to a safe orbit. He needed more information before trying anything else. He opened his onboard archives and began to dig into the old files he had stolen from the Imperial databanks before he left. Hidden deep in the encrypted folders, he found them ancient reports labeled Observer Class Contact. The files were short but clear. Origin, unknown. Purpose, observation, not conquest. Behavior, does not initiate violence. Responds with disabling force if attacked. Warning, do not engage. Full fleet loss recorded in incident #00972A. There were only a few incidents. Most ended the same way. Fleets disabled, ships stranded, no destruction, just silence and retreat. These ships watched, judged, and moved on. The Empire had tried to cover them up. Of course they did. But now one of them had returned. And instead of watching, it was sending out a pulse. A signal, a warning. Alan leaned back in his chair. If the Empire attacks again, it won't end the same way, he whispered. His thoughts were interrupted by a flash outside his window. Imperial ships were arriving, more of them. He saw the long, sharp hulls of destroyers drop out of hyperspace, forming attack lines. Their weapons powered up. Fighters launched in waves. Alan tapped his communicator and tried to hail them on a secure frequency. This is Commander Alan Rowe, former Imperial Navy, he said. Stand down. That ship is not hostile. Do not provoke it. Repeat, do not. Static cut him off. No one was listening. Back on the Obedience, Admiral Krell Varn stood tall on the bridge as the next wave of warships formed into assault formation. His jaw was tight. His orders were clear. This ship has already struck once, he said. It will not strike again. Begin attack sequence. Officers moved quickly. Commands were shouted. Hundreds of fighters accelerated toward the warship. Back on the Swift, Alan watched the attack unfold. He knew what would happen next. He had seen the pattern before. Just before the fighters reached their target, the warship released another pulse. A wave of light expanded from its core, passing through every ship. And once again, everything stopped. Engines died. Lights flickered out. Weapons froze. Even communications were lost. The entire assault fleet was frozen in space, powerless. But no ships were destroyed. The warship did not fire a single shot. Alan stared in silence. It wasn't attacking. It was warning them. He looked down at the message still glowing on his screen. Presence acknowledged. The Empire would not take this warning well. They would return with more firepower. They would not stop. And the next time, the warship might not show mercy. Alan tapped his controls and set a new course toward the silent vessel. I need to know what you are, he muttered, before they destroy you, or before you destroy us. The silence after the pulse was heavy. Imperial ships floated dead in space, their lights dimmed, engines offline, weapons cold. No explosions, no fire, no screaming alarms, just silence. A forced pause. The warship had stopped them without destroying them. Again, but the message was clear. Do not approach. Commander Alan Rowe watched from the edge of the field, His scout ship Swift untouched. The observer-class ship had ignored him, or perhaps spared him. Either way, he was still online. Around him, Imperial destroyers drifted, helpless and quiet. Aelin leaned forward, gripping the controls. He had to act fast. The Empire wouldn't stop after this. They would take the loss as a challenge. He knew Admiral Krell Varn. The man saw hesitation as weakness, and worse, he had the full force of the Empire behind him. If Aelin was going to learn the truth about the warship, he had to get inside it, now before the next wave came. He adjusted course, aimed for the ship's shadowed flank, and slowly accelerated. No response, no pulse. As he approached, he noticed something strange. His systems began syncing automatically. His ship lights matched the rhythm of the warship's glowing lines. It was as if Swift was being scanned, tested, or welcomed. Then a new message appeared on his screen. "You may enter." Aelin stared. He hadn't sent a request. He hadn't hailed it. But the message was clear. Something aboard the vessel had noticed him and had made a choice. He found a docking port, if it could be called that, near the ship's underside. It opened smoothly as he approached, forming a circular gate of light. His ship was pulled gently inside without engines. Gravity fields guided him. The moment Swift was secured, Aelin stood, secured his helmet, and stepped into the unknown. Inside, the warship was silent. There were no flashing panels, no crew, no sound. Just a vast corridor that stretched forward with smooth walls that glowed faintly. The air was breathable. The temperature was comfortable. The ship, it seemed, had prepared itself for him. Aelin walked slowly, each step echoing softly. His hand hovered over his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. He felt watched, but not threatened. Then he entered a chamber. It was large, round and empty, except for a floating sphere in the center. Light swirled inside it. As he approached, it came alive. Images formed. They showed distant galaxies, civilizations rising and falling, planets thriving, then breaking into silence. A voice, not a real voice, but something in his mind, spoke. "You are not the first." Aelin froze. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are the last of the Watchers. We come to observe, to remember, to warn." "Warn of what?" "Of paths that lead to silence. Your kind stands on the edge. Destruction follows power without wisdom." Aelin tried to stay calm. "We've changed. We've built peace in the core worlds. The Empire does not build peace. It enforces silence." The words hit hard. Aelin had once believed in the Empire's mission. Order, unity, safety. But over time, he had seen the cost. Broken colonies, censored truths, crushed resistance. He had left, not in anger, but in grief. "The Empire thinks you're a weapon," he said quietly. "They're preparing to attack with full force." The sphere pulsed. "They have already attacked. We chose not to answer, but the third strike will not be met with silence." Aelin felt a chill. "Then let me speak to them," he said. "Let me try." "You may try. Few listen to truth when they serve fear." The images faded. The lights dimmed. The voice left his mind. He turned and made his way back to Swift. As he boarded, the ship's systems lit up. A new data file had been uploaded. A message, not just for him, for everyone. He reviewed the file. It contained a clear warning. This was not a warship. It was an ancient observer, designed to monitor civilizations as they neared collapse. If provoked again, it would respond. Not with pulses, not with warnings, with judgment. Aelin sent the message out on all public frequencies. He included visuals, evidence, and his testimony. He encrypted a copy and sent it to independent networks. Then he set a course for the Imperial fleet. He had to speak to Varn face to face. He had to try one last time, but far away, aboard the Obedience. Admiral Krell Varn already had the report. The Second Fleet's failure was unacceptable. The Emperor himself had ordered action. Varn had summoned the main fleet, 10,000 ships, ready for total engagement. As he watched the battle plans load, an officer approached. "Sir, we've received a message from a former commander." Aelin Rowe. Varn didn't even look at the screen. "Delete it." Commander Alan Rowe sat in his cockpit, watching the stars blur past his ship's hull as he raced toward the front lines. Behind him, the ancient warship still floated near Cryos 7, silent and still. In front of him, thousands of Imperial ships gathered. The largest fleet deployment in decades. The Empire was preparing for war, not against an army, not against a rebellion, but against one ship. A ship they didn't understand. Alan clenched the controls of Swift and replayed the message the observer had left him. The words still echoed in his mind. The third strike will not be met with silence. He had tried sending the warning. He had sent the video feed, the observer's words, the truth. But Varn hadn't listened. The Empire wasn't interested in understanding. They wanted control, and if they couldn't control the ship, they would destroy it, or die trying. But there was one chance left. A direct approach. Alan turned Swift around and headed back. Not to the Imperial fleet. To the observer itself. The ship welcomed him again without resistance. The circular gate opened as before, pulling Swift inside with a calm, silent force. The same glowing corridor appeared. But this time, the energy inside felt stronger, like the ship was fully awake now. As Alan walked deeper into its core, he noticed new symbols glowing along the walls, circles, stars, lines of light moving like currents. They shifted as he passed, adjusting to him. The ship was alive, not in a biological sense, but aware. The central chamber awaited. This time, it was no longer empty. Holograms floated in the air, images of Imperial fleets, ships charging weapons, formations forming. The warship had tapped into the Empire's battle network. It knew everything, every plan, every move. "You see it all," Alan said aloud. "You know they're coming." The sphere in the center of the room responded with a pulse of light. The same mental voice entered his thoughts. "They do not seek truth. They seek to silence it." "They're afraid," Alan replied. "They think you're a threat." "We are, to their illusion." Alan walked closer. "Then show them what you are. Show the galaxy. If they knew, if people saw what you showed me, they'd understand." There was a pause. Then the chamber shifted. Walls retracted. A platform rose beneath his feet, lifting him upward. He passed through layers of transparent material, into a dome near the top of the warship. From there he could see everything. Space, stars, the broken moon, the drifting wrecks of the earlier Imperial fleets. The observer ship had no bridge, but this was its mind, its eye. Another sphere rose in front of him. Inside it, memories played. Civilizations Alan had never seen. Cities made of light, beings made of stone, metal, fire. Some peaceful, some violent, some united, some torn apart by war. The observer had traveled far across thousands of years, witnessing collapse after collapse. "Why watch?" Alan asked. "Why not help? We do not rule. We only warn. Each choice must be made freely. But all choices have cost." "You're giving us a chance," Alan whispered. "We gave the first, and the second. One remains," Alan understood. Now, the ship was not judging one man or one fleet. It was judging a civilization. It didn't want to fight. But if it was attacked again, it would act, not to punish, but to prevent worse. He stepped back and looked down toward the incoming fleet. The Imperial ships were now entering the system. Thousands of them. Lights blinking, formations forming. "They won't stop," Alan said. "But maybe someone will listen." The sphere dimmed, then flashed again. A file appeared in his datapad. A complete record of the observer's travels, not just warnings, but knowledge, history, lost science, proof. It was a gift, one last offering. Alan rushed back to Swift. As he strapped in and powered up, he saw a new command appear on his dashboard. Transmission authorization granted. He activated his wide-range transmitter and began sending the file live to every known channel. News networks, independent systems, mining colonies, free planets, even Imperial channels. The truth was now out in the open. The people would see. The Empire could try to ignore him, but they couldn't ignore everyone. As Swift exited the observer ship and flew toward the incoming fleet, Alan opened a direct channel to Admiral Varn's flagship. "This is Commander Alan Rowe," he said. "I've been aboard the vessel. It is not a threat, unless you make it one. I've sent a full report. Call off the attack." "Stand down." Silence. Then a reply. It was Admiral Varn. His voice was cold, calm. "You were always too soft, Rowe. This ship is a symbol, and symbols must be crushed." Alan's heart sank. "You don't understand. If you attack again, there won't be survivors." Varn did not answer. He gave no signal. But behind him the fleet began to move. Thousands of ships, engines ignited, weapons charged. The third strike was coming. And this time the observer would not hold back. The blackness of space lit up with movement. The Empire's full fleet had arrived. Thousands of ships perfectly aligned, stretched across the stars like a wall of steel. Carriers, dreadnoughts, destroyers, and squadrons of fighters took their positions in silence, guided by one voice, Admiral Krell Varn. He stood on the command deck of the Obedience, hands behind his back, staring at the observer warship on the main display. His face was hard, eyes narrow. He had reviewed the files Alan Rowe had broadcasted. He had seen the images, read the messages, watched the observer's recordings, and he dismissed all of it. "It's a trick," he told his officers. "Ancient propaganda. Smoke and light." "Sir," said Captain Frell, his second in command, "if what Rowe says is true, then we would all be dead already." First interrupted. "That ship has power, yes, but it hesitates, and hesitation is weakness." The room fell silent. Varn turned to the fleet's command console and gave the final order. "All wings advance. Target all energy cores. Fire at will." Far ahead in the quiet space between the fleets, Swift hovered alone. Inside the small cockpit, Commander Alan Rowe stared at the incoming formation. His ship trembled as the Empire's assault wave surged forward. The silence of deep space was broken by the hum of thousands of engines, the blinking of thousands of weapon locks. They were all heading for the observer, and he was in the middle of it. Alan activated his transmitter and broadcast once more, this time on every open Imperial channel. "This is Commander Alan Rowe," he said, voice steady. "Stand down. You're about to trigger something none of us can stop. This ship is not your enemy. It's your last warning." No response, only fighters speeding past him. His screen lit up with proximity alerts. He was being ignored. Worse, erased. He had seconds. So he acted. Alan turned Swift toward the warship, flew directly between it and the incoming fleet, and shut off his engines. He drifted forward, arms raised, no weapons armed, just a single man floating between a civilization and its mistake. He opened one last broadcast, this time to the entire galaxy. "People of the Empire. People of the free worlds. Listen, that ship behind me is not a monster. It is history. It is warning us. It has seen more than we can imagine. And if we strike it now, it will respond. Not with revenge, but with judgment." He paused, heart racing. The third strike ends everything. The camera feed from his ship stayed live. All across the galaxy, people watched. Farmers in the outer colonies, traders in deep space routes, soldiers in orbit, citizens of the core worlds. Even some Imperial officers on Varn's own fleet paused as the transmission reached them. But on the Obedience, Admiral Varn showed no emotion. "End the broadcast," he said. The officer hesitated. "Sir, it's transmitting across public relays." "I said end it." He gave a final command. "All ships fire." The attack began. Hundreds of torpedoes launched. Energy beams tore across space. The Imperial fleet unleashed its full power at once. A wave of destruction aimed at the silent warship. Alan could only watch. The observer ship didn't move. Instead, it changed. Its outer hull split open, revealing layers of glowing structures beneath. Rings of energy spun around its core. A shield, one unlike anything Alan had seen, formed in an instant. Every beam, every missile, every blast hit it and vanished. not deflected. Absorbed, erased. The observer responded. Not with noise, not with destruction. With light. A pulse exploded from its core. Not a weapon. A message. But this time, it did more than shut systems down. Time itself seemed to bend. The Empire's ships slowed, froze, flickered. Then, they began to vanish. One by one, the lead destroyers folded in on themselves, vanishing in bursts of blue energy. Fighters blinked out mid-flight. The Obedience began to tremble. Its lights went dark. Crew members screamed as gravity warped. Alan's ship remained untouched. The observer had spared him again. He stared as the might of the Empire's fleet dissolved into silence. It was not war. It was removal. Varn's voice came through one last time, broken and distorted. You fools. We were order. Then his signal died. Nothing remained of the fleet but drifting debris and fading lights. The pulse ended. The warship dimmed again. Its shields retracted. The glowing ring slowed. It returned to stillness, like it had simply gone back to sleep. Alan sat motionless. He had survived. But the price had been paid. He opened his systems and checked the message logs. His broadcast had gone out. Billions had seen it. The truth could no longer be hidden. And across the galaxy, people began to whisper a new name. Not the Empire, not the Observer, but Ro, the man who had stood between them. He looked back at the ship, now quiet once more. Are you done? He whispered. No reply. But a new message appeared on his console. We will watch. We will wait. One day, your kind may choose better. The ship turned slowly, silently. Then, without sound, it vanished into a point of white light. Gone. Alan leaned back, eyes closed. The battle was over. The choice had been made. The remains of the Imperial fleet drifted in cold silence. Twisted metal floated where once thousands of ships had stood. No distress calls. No signs of life. Just wreckage, silent, scattered like ashes over the shattered moon of Cryo 7. And at the center of it all, Commander Alan Rowe sat alone in his small scout ship, swift, staring at the empty space where the observer had vanished. The warship was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. Moved beyond reach, beyond sensors, beyond the grasp of the Empire. Alan took a deep breath. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. He had tried to stop it. He had given warnings, sent the truth, stood in its path. But the Empire had made its choice, and the observer had answered. The silence now was worse than any battle. Across the galaxy, confusion spread like wildfire. News of the fleet's disappearance reached every corner of civilization. People didn't believe it at first. They thought it was a trick, a rumor, a mistake. But then the transmissions from Swift began to play. Videos of Alan's message, footage of the battle, the pulse, the sudden vanishing of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. And slowly, the truth settled in. The Empire was broken, not by armies, not by rebellion, by a choice it refused to understand. Back in the core worlds, leaders of systems that once bowed to imperial law met in secret. Some were frightened, some were angry, but all of them had seen the message. All of them had watched as power failed to control what it feared. Many called for peace, others demanded strength, but none called for war, not yet. Without Admiral Varn, without the fleet, the Empire had no voice strong enough to shout over the silence the observer had left behind. On a dusty planet in the Outer Rim, children gathered around old holoscreens, watching Alan's broadcast over and over. They didn't understand all the words, but they saw what mattered. A man standing between danger and destruction, unarmed, unafraid. They saw someone choose to speak, not to fire. And it gave them hope. Alan stayed near Cryo 7 for 2 more days. He helped recover what he could. Data drives, escape pods, damaged satellites. No survivors were found. No new signals from the observer. He checked his systems every hour, hoping for a new message, a final word, anything. But there was only silence. The ship had said what it came to say. Now it was up to humanity to decide what came next. On the third day, Alan set a course for deep space, not toward the core, not toward the remnants of the Empire. He headed outward, toward the unknown regions. There were more observer records hidden in the data he had received, clues, coordinates, names, other places the ship had visited, other worlds that had fallen, or survived. He wanted to know why. Maybe there were others like him, asking the same questions. Maybe there were more ships watching. Maybe this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something new. As Swift disappeared into hyperspace, Alan left behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The Empire had fired first. The Observer had answered. And one man had stood in between. History would remember them all.